and what happened today. We had the committee stage of the bill today, which was the bit where we had to amend the bill from second reading. And the reason that we had to amend it is that we hadn't really dealt, I didn't feel, with two issues. One was what I would call the democratic deficit of ministers giving guidance, which had, when they say that they're giving guidance, they're pretty much giving instruction. And therefore Parliament, and particularly the House of Lords recently, has got a bit sniffy about this. And so we wrote into the face of the bill on the amendments today that any guidance had to be placed before the House of Commons, had to be laid in Parliament. And the advantage to that was that it meant we could remove the threat of a sunset clause that would have reviewed the whole legislation in 3 years or so, because the fact that the guidance by any Secretary of State to health authorities, education authorities, or local authorities, the fact that that needs to be set out in Parliament means that Parliament can scrutinise it in real time. And it means that issues like employment, issues like been possible with the first on the face of the bill. The second is that we were very keen that those Down syndrome or the have who held responsible for implementation at the integrated care boards. And there was a very strong resistance, I have to say, from officials to having a named person on the integrated care boards for that. Clearly, it doesn't take a genius to work out that the implications are that every other group is going to look for a named person. Frankly, I don't see that is a problem, because I think we do need to have some democratization and greater accountability in these boards, rather than them just being some nameless elements of the bureaucracy. So that these two amendments, I think, took the bill from being nice and warm and well-meaning into being something much more deliverable and much more hard-edged. I was actually very keen that the committee today didn't play up too much on these two amendments, because let's put it this way, I think ministers might be a touch distracted at the moment, so I've no intention of drawing their attention to things that might be precedents that maybe they didn't really want to have. But now that we've got that through committee, we will have the remaining stages on the 4th of February. And I imagine that will now be pretty much a formality, and that we'll have the bill out of the House of Commons on its way to the House of Lords by a week on Friday, which is faster than we thought we could get it done. We thought at the 7th of March, but we managed to pull a little bit of a fast one and get it much more speedy than we expected. So it will now be up to Baroness Hollis and Lord Astor to steer it through the Lords. They think they can do it in the Lords in one day, and we have removed, by putting the amendment, excuse me, on the scrutiny of the guidance on the face of the bill, the one possible reservation that they might have had in the Lords. So I think that we preempted it. And when I speak in the House on the 4th of February, I'll make that very clear, that having dealt with the democratic deficit element and having debated it in committee, there is no reason whatsoever why the unelected House should choose to amend a bill that's passed with unanimity, with government support and all party support through all stages in the House of Commons. So I would hope that we're now well on our way. We've passed way beyond at the points of greatest danger for this bill. So my view is it's now going to become law. It's simply a matter of the date.
Thank you. That's been so helpful explaining that for us tonight. If people want to understand about the amendments, is that going to come out in a sort of written form that they can sort of access via the Parliament website soon?
Yes, there are explanatory notes on the amendments, and there's what I said in the committee and what the minister said in explanation of them, and that will be in Hansard tomorrow.
Excellent. It was very emotional. I don't know. I mean, obviously you're in there doing your work, and we're so grateful for it. But all of us listening in all around the country, it was a very emotional way to start the day. So thank you so much.
It was also a very nice way for us to start the day because away from the psychodrama of Downing Street parties, it was actually nice where everyone had a common aim. And the reason it was so quick going through today, as I started to explain at the beginning, is that we'd done all the work in advance. We had dealt with all the issues. Every single person on the committee had been briefed, and we'd had a pre-meeting the 2 nights before. So we all knew exactly what it is we were looking at. We knew what questions had been answered and had not been answered, but it was essential that Gillian Keegan actually said the words that there would be a named person, and that we would lay the guidance. And then when we asked the questions about would this be able to take into account issues around labour and issues around other similar conditions, we already had those discussions, so that today was just really a formal reassertion of what we'd already decided between all of us to do. So that's my kind of democracy, you know, that we've all agreed what we want to achieve, and we all know which questions are going to be asked, and we all know what the answers are going to be. And that's the easiest kind of democracy. And as someone who used to be the Friday whip, whose job was mostly to block private members' bills, it's certainly an advantage when you know how the game gets played. So if you wouldn't have been able to see the faces probably of all the MPs, but there were a few wry smiles as we went through the process, with all of us knowing exactly, you know, how it was going to end.
Why is it important, this concept of a named person? Can you explain for those of us who aren't in politics?
Well, it's one thing to have rights. It's another thing to be able to enforce them. And if you simply have these boards with a vague duty, as a body being told that you are expected to deliver X, if you have a named person on that board whose responsibility is set out to deliver the application of the Down Syndrome Act as it will be then people know who to go to. They know if they've got a problem, you are the person who is supposed to be delivering this. And the worry that a lot of us have had about the integrated care system is that who does what, who's responsible for what in it. Now, we've kind of set the pace here by so far we're the only person who's named with a specific responsibility would be someone for Down syndrome. I don't imagine that's going to stand much contact with the system, because there'll be others who are immediately out there demanding the same thing. In many senses, not only is that not my problem, but I actually quite approve of that. I think that there should be nominated people, that people know who is actually going to be responsible in healthcare for the elements of care to which they are, you know, dependent upon. And the idea that you simply have sort of some vague, nameless civil service, I don't think is, in this day and age, is good enough. And privately, when we had the meeting 2 nights ago, there was some surprise from the opposition parties, and they said, you do realize the precedent that this is setting? And I said, well, it's gone through what's called the right round process, because after the second reading, we made it very clear that we didn't think that the issue of redress or accountability had been dealt with. Therefore, these amendments that we agreed had to separately go round the whole cabinet, and they have to agree or object to it, and they all agreed to it. So no one can say that they didn't know or they weren't notified about the changes we were proposing. And there will be quite a few of my colleagues who will be quite happy to say, oh dear, did we set a precedent, knowing full well that that's really what many of them wanted.
I was really touched, and my background's in psychiatry, so I've had contact with people of all sorts of learning disabilities. And I was really pleased that you were able to bring in the rightful concern that's out there amongst the broader community. I'm very hopeful that this will be a model for other disabilities. Can you tell us a little bit more about when you spoke about that today?
I don't think it would have, I'm not sure it would have been a model before these amendments we put in today.
Yeah.
As I said, these amendments crossed the line from, in my view, from being well-meaning of how the bill stood at second reading, although we knew we were going to amend it, to today having some teeth. And I think it's an answer to all those who said, well, there's nothing really in this bill, it doesn't actually enforce anything. I think if you look at the combination of the way that the Secretary of State advice and guidance will be given, to the fact that if that has to be laid before Parliament, that means that the parliamentary committees can scrutinise it and call the Secretary of State to Parliament to say, well, this is what you said it was going to mean. Is this what it has meant in practice? And right at the other end, you've got that named person who is responsible for applying it at a local level. So we sort of put in two safeguards that weren't there before, or at least two measures in there before. And I think that I couldn't hand on heart have said, I think it would have been groundbreaking for other groups before today. But I was talking to the committee chairman after, and she said it was only during the discussions in the committee itself I realized what it was we were actually doing. But you know, it's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say.
Absolutely. And sometimes it takes that, example of what good practice is for us to be able to understand, I think, professionals out there in the workforce to change.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people just haven't understood the process. They didn't understand that when we said at second reading that we would come back to amend it. And the reason that we had all agreed at second reading that we didn't want a half-baked idea in it. We wanted to make sure it had full buy-in across government, and that this was actually going to be something different from what we've had, however well-meaning in the past. And I think it is. And I think that it'll be, the debates in the House of Lords will be very interesting, because they will undoubtedly say, well, if the government's willing to set a precedent on guidance and laying it before Parliament for this, for Down syndrome in a private member's bill, why are they not willing to do it across the board? And you can't in any way fault the logic in that. Plus, I think it's a good thing. I'm always in favour of Parliament having greater scrutiny powers. And I think the NHS in particular has far too little scrutiny on how it operates with far too much money. So I think this is we put some good principles down today.
Thank you. And what can we do as a community to get involved with this consultation?
Well, the key thing now is going to be the guidance. It's going to be, how is that guidance reached, and who is involved in setting that guidance. That was a bit of a worry for me if we didn't have parliamentary oversight. The fact that we've got parliamentary oversight means that people can be in touch with their MP and say, I think you should be asking about this, and the whole issue can be discussed then through Parliament, where previously it was going to depend on whoever had been selected to be the advisory committee on the guidance. So we've made that much less of a risk by what we did today. And again, I think that's a big plus, because it's not a small number of people now. It can come under full parliamentary committee scrutiny, where the questions can be asked coming from a much wider range of the public than just a selected and appointed committee.
And I know there's been a lot of kind of curiosity at how does this differ from the Autism Act as a whole, from your point of view so far?
Well, it recognises, as I said today, that first of all, it's not about a condition. It's about the people who have the condition and what they have a right to expect. And it says, I have been a bit irritated through the process by people saying, well, Down syndrome is just another learning difficulty. Well, it isn't just another learning difficulty. One element of it is learning difficulty, but there's also the very complex health needs. And one of the reasons that I took this challenge up in the first place was that we've all, as constituents MPs, got a bit sick of parents who we all know parents who are fighting the educational system for learning difficulties, but Down syndrome parents have two other issues as well. One is the complex medical needs, so they tend to have to fight the monolith of the NHS and the educational authorities, and now with the change in the demographics and life expectancy, the care authorities at the same time. And it may well be that others will follow in the footsteps of this. But I was, from the very beginning and from the very first discussions, I was not willing to say, well, Down syndrome is just a subset of learning difficulties, therefore you leave it at that, because we all know that the real heartache that parents have over getting the appropriate things for their children with learning difficulties. But when that's compounded by having to be dealing with ENT, potentially dealing with hematology oncology, when you're dealing with a whole range of other health issues, the problems are multiplied up. And that's why I think it was so important that a named person on the integrated care boards is responsible for the application of this legislation, because of those multiple fronts. And unless you've seen parents doing it or you've done it yourself, you've no idea how exhausting it is for parents to have to fight on multiple fronts against the big bureaucracies of the state. So I'm not sure that the state will enjoy necessarily what's happened following today, but I think it was necessary that we put those elements in place. And someone said to me in the tea room afterwards, are you not worried? As a friend of mine is actually a doctor, is also an MP, or are you not worried that everyone else will follow suit? I said, well, if everyone else follows suit and they all know who is accountable for the provision of their care, why is that a bad thing, other than the fact it inconveniences the bureaucracy somewhat?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. And it's so refreshing to hear you speak like that. Well, and I want to speak on behalf of the National Down Syndrome Policy Group and just convey our great thanks that you've worked so hard to bring in those amendments to give this, as you say, more teeth. It's been a pleasure working with yourself in your office so far. So we look forward to that.
Well, thank you. And it was, if there was a better example of a gamekeeper turned poacher, I can't think of what it is in recent times, but it's you can when you've been around a long time, you can there's a fair amount of personal capital you can use to get what you want, plus you know where the traps lie and you can find your way around them. So one of the Labour MPs says you'll be now invited on the circuit by MPs to explain how to get a PMB through. I said, not likely.
You've got a retirement plan there. I also want to let you know that we had recently, I didn't hold it, one of our members with Down syndrome, Fionn, held the first advisory group meeting, which was very successful. And we will be working really hard to support them to develop reports, to feedback to yourselves what the views are of people with Down syndrome and what they would love to see their government deliver to them to improve their care for the future. So we'll do everything we can.
The reason that today was really important, and that was that as the bill was when it left second reading, the aim that you described there would have been entirely dependent on persuading members of the advisory group to take up those issues. The fact that it can now be taken up by the select committee gives a much wider range of input into the process, and therefore scrutiny of how it operates from here. And for me, that's the really big change, because it's not really dependent on the goodwill of the advisory committee or the Secretary of State. It's now up to MPs on behalf of their constituents, which will be a much, much wider spectrum, able to hold to account the Secretary of State for health, for guidance on the health elements, education for the educational elements, and the Secretary of State responsible for social care, which will be health and social care again, for the other elements of it. And so there is a much wider ability to hold to account those who are making policy now than there was before today. And again, it might look like just a little one-liner, but but these things can have genuine impact when you understand what they mean. So I take very much your point, Elizabeth, about people understanding it. So I'll make sure that we disseminate not just what we said today, but the explanatory notes that were available for MPs to explain to them what these amendments actually meant.
Yes, I'm sorry, and we have an advisory group as well, made up of people with Down syndrome. So we've got them working hard to develop their points of view, develop what they want to let you guys know. So,
well, they will be able to give. You see, again, the change today is they will be able to give their own evidence.
Okay.
To a select committee as it looks at the guidance itself.
Okay.
So once a year or whatever the health committee decides to do, they will be able to do an assessment of how the guidance is actually affecting people on the ground, and to ask for changes to that guidance. And your group, for example, would be able to give evidence directly to that committee, as they will have a right to do, which wasn't something that would necessarily have been a right before today. And so we've widened out the scope of any future consideration and any consultation because of that. And that can only be a good thing.
Okay. I think you have to go. I have a feeling we've stole extra 10 minutes from you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate it, and we'll buy you a beer when we see you on the 21st.
Well, you mentioned my background as a doctor. I used to say to my civil servants, the difference between a civil servant and a doctor is that for a doctor, a good outcome is the patient got better, and for a civil servant, a good outcome is you treated the patient for a very long time. So this has been very much an outcome-focused exercise, and I hope it turns out successfully.
All good so far. Patients looking healthy.
Great
Thank
stuff.
you. Take care, Dr.
Thank you very
Fox.
much. And you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, wonderful to have him here. I have to apologize because there's so many questions that have come in that haven't been submitted ahead of time. I've tried to fit them in where I could, but we will have some questions answered shortly by our next two speakers that are going to give us a sort of update on where we are, what are the stages of a private member's bill, and then we're also going to have some more questions covered by the lovely Professor Buckley. But any questions that we don't cover tonight, bear in mind that as a team, we are doing our best to update the frequently asked questions, and just do keep in touch with us via email, and we will get to the questions as soon as we can, as soon as we get answers from the relevant bodies. So I am going to, without further ado, welcome up onto the stage Rachel and Ken Ross. Welcome, guys. They're fellow team members and the National Down Syndrome Policy Group. They're going to fill us in a little bit, as I said, on the stages of the bill. Let me know when you want me to put the graphic up, guys, and I will hand over to you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Evening, everyone. It's great to see so many of our community joining the webinar this evening. And thank you to you all for your positive feedback and valuable contributions so far. It's all very much appreciated. And it's great to see the overwhelming majority of Down syndrome groups in the UK behind us. So thank you very much to everyone for helping to get us to this stage. It's just brilliant. We had good news today at the committee meeting. We've moved on another stage further, and we thought it might be a good idea just to briefly recap the bill's passage. Before we begin, I just wanted to mention very quickly about positive terminology. We need to have to remember that there are many people who aren't familiar, as we are, with Down syndrome and learning disability and the correct terminology. And so if we could just ask everyone to be patient with that and to guide people rather than criticise, I think everyone would very much appreciate that, and it'd be very beneficial. So just a bit of patience for those new to the area.
Great, thanks. Yes, Liz, if you could pop the slide up, that'd be marvellous. Thank you very much. So as we can see, we went through the first reading of the bill, which was a very simple process. It was just reading out the title of the bill and saying when the second reading was going to be, which is the 26th of November. So if you'd popped out to make a coffee, you'd have missed all of that. Your next occasion would be the 26th of November. what was really exciting about that stage of the bill was we got to hear from lots of different MPs from across the political spectrum, all of whom had a personal story that they wanted to share, the understanding and explaining the importance of this bill and what their hopes were for the bill. So beyond the dry legislation that that laws can sometimes be, actually it's the human stories behind them which are really important. And it was very refreshing. There were so many connections with people with Down syndrome, with the politicians, that you could see that there's a real groundswell to come up with something very, very meaningful. As Liam said, there was a couple of elements which were excluded from the bill, which were tidied up today in the committee stage. So the elements around redress. The reason it was excluded is because this has happened so quickly, and there was a chance to think, let's not just rearrange the deck chairs and deliver the same old, but let's actually try and have something which is meaningful, fit for purpose, and is going to be going forward to change the outcomes for people with Down syndrome. What was also pretty apparent from everything which has been going on with the bill so far is that although this bill is only for people with Down syndrome, the outcomes, the successful outcomes, the consultation, and the guidance, if it works for people with Down syndrome, why wouldn't the government and the state consider this for other groups as well? At the end of the day, we have a very successful country in providing services, but sometimes the joined up nature of those services doesn't really make sense to lots of us looking in from the outside. And in fact, one of the things we've seen throughout this process is even the parliamentary process to MPs doesn't necessarily always seem to make sense. So with that as a backdrop, I just think it's so helpful that information surrounding services for people with Down syndrome will be collected into one place. And again, today we saw unanimous support through the committee stage to move the bill further on. So between now and the 4th of February, we go into the report stage. So this is really bringing together all the elements of the bill, adding in the amendments, and hopefully we'll actually see some of that. I don't know if Hansard's been issued yet today, but certainly we'll see Hansard tomorrow detailing all of these elements. There should be an easy read version coming out as well. So for anyone who's looking to access that, we'll be staying on top of the Bill's office to ensure that that's issued in quick order. The third reading on the 4th of February, it's the third item of the day. The two bills beforehand are what's called government handout bills. So we're expecting those to sail through very quickly, and there may be some more words that other politicians would like to say about the third reading. It will then pass to the House of Lords, and as Liam said, the timetable for the House of Lords, I think they're aiming for around the 7th of March to actually debate it all in one day. So we're looking in really good shape. This has been an incredibly fast process, a huge amount of work for everyone involved, but pretty gripping, exciting, and just really to pick up on the point that Rachel said, for all of us, matters surrounding Down syndrome, whether it's for people with Down syndrome, whether it's families, whether it's people who work with people with Down syndrome, we're all very, very familiar with it. Today we heard some really well-made speeches where some of the terminology was perhaps not to everyone's liking or choice, but let's be patient with people. Part of this bill is going to be around awareness, education, inclusion, and let's keep this environment friendly and embracing and welcoming. And we can work with the politicians, we can work with the civil servants, we can work with the practitioners to deliver a really smart piece of legislation and some really great services for people with Down syndrome. And let's help them get there with the language. So yeah, we're very excited about where we are with the bill so far. When we leave the House of Lords, we then just need to wait for the Queen's signature. That usually is done on a set day, and you never know. We may be lucky and actually have the signature done as a special day outside of a usual signing day. And then the bill becomes an act. So when the bill becomes an act, it's then law. And as what was said before, the bill is an enabling piece of legislation. And the purpose of that is it's going to create guidelines, and the guidelines are going to incorporate a strategy. All of this is brilliant that everyone can be a stakeholder in this. There are some really good examples of good practice throughout the country, but at the moment, one of the main drivers for us in pushing for this law is that the quality of service and delivery can be quite sporadic. So when we get past the bill becoming law, the guidelines, we're hoping, according to the civil servants, if they're working with everyone at the right speed, we should have those guidelines out within a year. They're also very aware that they'll move nimbly to adapt the guidelines. There's some very clear outcomes that ministers and MPs would like to see, and if there's anything that people feel is missing when we get to the guidelines, then there's an opportunity to evolve those guidelines as well. So one of the things that is probably important to say as well is this won't be a silver bullet. This doesn't suddenly mean everything is going to be perfect for everyone when this becomes law, but hopefully the dial starts moving, services start improving, awareness gets better, practices get better, and we'll start to see a much more inclusive and welcoming environment for people with Down syndrome at all stages of their life. So we're really excited. I'd like to thank everyone who's involved with the National Down Syndrome Policy Group for all the hard work that they've put in so far in getting us here. It's no mean feat, and there's a wonderful precedent being set, not just for people with Down syndrome around the world, but for people with other conditions in the UK who could benefit from this type of legislation.
Thank you, Ken. Just a quick question. So is this bill had cross-party support? I know the answer to that, but let's hear.
The bill has unanimous cross-party support. And one of the things which is also probably worth mentioning is, although the bill is just for England, again, from conversations with the civil servants who deal with their counterparts in all of the devolved nations, there's very much a willingness to have a joined up approach in how the outcomes from this bill can also be disseminated through those countries as well, working within their own legal framework. So it would have been nice if this said this was a law for the whole of the UK, but integrating policy within the legal frameworks of the devolved nations is very tricky because the private members bill moves so quickly. That in itself, just the time frame alone, makes it quite difficult to actually get everyone to dovetail in together. So very pleasing to hear that the devolved nations will also be looking to see how they can best work with the Westminster to ensure that there's a sort of a democracy in outcomes and services across the country.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. We're going to move on now. I hope that's okay, guys. We really appreciate the update you've given us, and we will, make sure that that information is out there. When we get a date, we'll let you know, but obviously it's all subject to Parliament. So we will pass on any information we get straight to everyone as soon as we have it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So just a sort of little admin point for everybody. I can't share screen and see questions. So if you have questions, can you submit them to NDSPG admin? You'll see them as an attendee. They're collating our questions very nicely there, and we will cover them either now or we'll be covering them in future webinars or on our website. We're running over. I hope you guys can stay a bit late because we want to be able to hear all of the rest of the speakers we have this evening. After Professor Buckley, who's next, we're going to be hearing from Fionn about how has the first advisory group gone. We want to hear a little bit about how that has gone for him, collecting and hearing the voices of his contemporaries with Down syndrome. So Hang on, don't disappear if we run over. Okay, so let me invite the wonderful Professor Buckley up on stage. Thank you so much, Sue, for making time to be here. I know that you're now working on an international level with other organizations, so you gave your apologies to an American meeting to be here, and you had to be in our corner, right? This is too big to miss. As everyone will know, Sue Buckley runs Down Syndrome Education International, and her experience really, I'd spend the rest of the webinar telling you it. So I'm just going to hand over to you and tell me when you want your slides and everything moved.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Liz. Please do put the slides up. And while you're doing that, can I first say a huge thank you to everybody who's worked so hard to get this far. Leanne, everybody in the government, but none of this would have happened but for the initiative of the National Down Syndrome Policy Group. And I'm very impressed, because some of you will know we've tried this before. Peter was involved, Peter Brackett, who's now playing a large part in this, was involved in our first effort with an APPGDS. And we weren't as successful as you've been. I'm very impressed, and I think it's hugely important. And I will try not to talk for 15 minutes. I will go through my slides and make the key points, because I think it's really important. We hear from Fionn and we hear from James and Heidi, as opposed to getting a lecture from me. So I've put the key points on slides about why I'm very positive about supporting this. And I have read all the comments and criticisms. I'm going to put forward my views. Okay, so next slide, please. So, quick summary. The first question that we need to address, and that has been raised, is should we treat children and adults with Down syndrome as a particular population? And my answer to that is yes, which I'll elaborate on in a moment. That we've lots of research in recent years. Okay, and it matters. And that the challenge then, from what we've learned from research, is getting that implemented in practice, holding providers to account. And the bill is a huge step in that direction. And I was really overwhelmed by listening to the committee this morning and hearing the things that Leanne's just told you. A named person on our integrated care boards, guidelines scrutinised and voted on in Parliament, which means practitioners and civil servants will have to do something about it. Okay, we will really, hopefully, get evidence-based practice accepted. And I should really have made the point first that giving a voice to individuals with Down syndrome is hugely important. So just a few more words on each of these points. If you give me the next slide, Liz. Okay, now, why am I so enthusiastic and so keen that this should happen? Well, many of you know I'm a psychologist. I've worked in learning disability for 50 years, time I retired. When we started out, we knew very little about why someone with Down syndrome showed delayed development. We could describe it as delayed. They would get the label of mental handicap, but this just described the fact they don't hit their milestones on time. It didn't tell us why. Over the last 40 plus years, we've learned a huge amount about how all children learn and develop, how processes unfold over time. Brain structure and function isn't fixed at birth for any child. The more we know about how processes like learning to walk or learning to talk are unfolding for typical children, then we could look more closely to see where, if you're born with Down syndrome, these processes are affected in small ways or bigger ways with cascading effects over time. So we've learned a huge amount, okay, about development. And every time in my life, we've had a little bit more information. So quite early on, evidence began to appear about verbal working memory difficulties, with the research being done with teenagers. My immediate question is, where does this start in the first year of life? How does this system develop? If it's delayed later, can we intervene early? And the answer is yes. Next slide, please, Liz. So, this extra chromosome does lead to a specific profile of needs in both health and development. And the earlier we target them, the better. And I've got a couple of examples there when I've picked up. So I won't elaborate, but speech difficulties. We know children's brains are tuning in for speech in the first weeks of life. Okay, motor development, all these things we're learning a huge amount about because of researchers all over the world who are very focused in doing research because they want to understand in order to improve life and improve outcomes for youngsters with Down syndrome. So we have this specific profile of strengths and weaknesses, which does not apply to everybody else with learning disability. Some things may be similar, but the overall profile of needs is unique to folks with Down syndrome. Next slide, Liz. Okay, and I've seen 1 or 2 comments on Twitter about, is there really a specialised literature? Well, I've just put these on here. I have been involved recently in guidelines in the US for inclusive education based on ones that we developed in 2012 with the first APP GDS in the UK. I've been involved in a toolkit for speech and language therapists. Anybody who wants to look can see the list of research references and the things that we've learned. The big thing is we've got all this information that experts and researchers know about, but it isn't getting into practice. What the bill should help us do is really get evidence-based practice adopted. We know families constantly tell us the professionals who work with them may not know very much about Down syndrome. Parents have often learned more than the professionals they come across. We also know those people are very busy, those professionals, so the time it takes to keep up with the research, evaluate it, synthesize it, draw out the practical implications takes time. And if we can get expert groups doing that and putting forward models of best practice, that should help busy professionals actually deliver. Next slide, Liz. Okay, and again, yeah, over the time I've been involved, and many of you will know, my daughter with Down syndrome died just over a year ago at the age of 51. If I think what life was like when she came to us as a baby in 1971, the world is totally transformed. All these specific groups didn't exist. There was almost no information on Down syndrome. But you've only got to look at the fact that all over the world, family groups and professionals have started specific groups to look at Down syndrome. Okay. Next slide. So it's obvious that the needs of young people with Down syndrome and their families are specific and do justify a targeted approach. We need those government endorsed guidelines. I've obviously listed the things I'm most interested in, which is the ones affecting development. We need to get training to professional practitioners in initial training. Speech therapists might get just a few hours when they train, teachers similarly, if you're lucky. Okay, we need to get much more into initial training and then into continuing professional development and have standards for practice that are endorsed by the government. And I do think the things approved at the committee stage this morning were dramatic. They really were dramatic. I couldn't believe I was listening to it in terms of how that's moving on, giving the bill teeth. Okay, and we need to work together. Okay, again, I've been around a long time and I get very sad about squabbling and infighting between different organisations. And a healthy debate is fine for exchange of information. You know, we don't have to agree about everything. But we need to work together to be effective and not to undermine one another. So we need to work together, and we really need to ensure the voices of individuals with Down syndrome are heard. Next slide, Liz. We have been much slower than other countries. In the US, there are ambassadors involved in Washington with the support of a variety of organisations, ambassadors that are people with Down syndrome representing themselves. We've been slow to do that in this country, to get that voice into government and to MPs. I've mentioned my daughter. She taught me far more about what's important about living with Down syndrome than I ever taught her, especially during her adult life. And while I'm focusing on the research that's telling us how being born with that extra chromosome has impacted on development, development is an interactive set of social processes. So we're not denying the importance of changing attitudes, changing beliefs, Opportunities matter, and in Roberta's life this was huge, getting out of a segregated school system and on a bus that isolated her, and getting into adult living where she was treated for the first time as a person first, with a right to lead a life like everybody else at 23 and get a boyfriend and get into bed with him if she wanted to. Her world was transformed, her self-esteem, her self-confidence, and she demonstrated abilities I would never have dreamt of. And that's what I mean. And she continued to teach us that as she dealt with serious illness in the later years of her life. Okay, we do need to do that. Down syndrome, the label still brings the myths and the low expectations, which is another reason for tackling it head on, not having them buried in the learning disability heading. Okay, next slide, Liz. Okay, so we need to use the levers in existing legislation. I think Leanne Fox touched on this. Yes, there are general rights enshrined in law. They're often not fully delivered because of the lack of money, but also we want focused interventions that do the right things based on the research and the evidence. We don't just want money wasted. So if we want to get what resources there are used to biggest effect, we need targeted ones. You know, the needs are different to all these other people who may also have learning disabilities. Okay. And dialogue with consumers, both families and individuals with Down syndrome, getting to the heart of government, really, really important. Okay. And there'll never be enough resources. We've got loads of legislation over 100 years, which is wonderful, but doesn't get implemented. It says all the right things, but there aren't the resources in terms of experts and money to do it. So we need to work cooperatively, not just simply complain that professionals don't meet our needs. There will never be enough on the ground. It's cooperative working. Okay. And the point's already been made that what we're achieving is a model for others. Next slide, Liz, please. Okay. So I do think, you know, it matters. And I do think it matters how young people are identified. We should have a birth register. We called for this in 2012. We said, how can we hold educators to account? How can we focus on what progress children are making in schools if they're not identified? If they're just lumped in learning disability? We asked for Down syndrome to be a separate group when schools report. And I think it's going to happen now, isn't it? It's going to happen. You know, to get this support, cross-party support, is fantastic. Yeah. So, and we've been refused application to research grants in the past by civil servants who basically told us Down syndrome doesn't exist. They don't recognise it. They're not going to spend money on research that's specific. Hopefully that will change too. Okay, Liz, last slide, I think. Okay, so I do think children and adults with Down syndrome are special with unique needs that we're now getting recognised. I also think it's it is an enabling framework. And I wrote these slides before I listened to the committee. Yeah, it is an enabling framework, and it's moved on hugely with those decisions today. And it's up to us to make sure it delivers the right things. It's up to us to avoid any potential pitfalls. Yeah, you know, it's not going to just be a sunny rainbow exercise. We may find it quite hard to get expert evidence developed in the way we would like it to be, but we all need to work together. And certainly I, for one, and DSEI are ready to stand with you. We're on the topics we've got expertise for, on getting evidence-based guidance going. And I know I've shared this with members of the group already. I was involved in the early support programme. And the way we worked with our education guidelines the first time round, we made sure we had representatives from all the professions we wanted to adopt the guidelines once they were out. So with the early support, we wrote to all the Royal Colleges for physio, speech therapy, midwives, health visitors, etc., and asked them to put a representative on the working group. So if they're in at the ground level, their professionals are likely to take it forward. So I stand ready to share my expertise and to help to take this to the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue. And yeah, well done. You kept us looking at your watch there. Well done.
Yeah, I'm not sure I did shorten it, but anyway.
I didn't want you to shorten it, and the team members are saying we could just listen to Sue speak all night. So thank you so much. And just a little reflection that as a part of the work to support Parliament, we've been collating all of the papers, and Sue's name comes up so much. She's devoted so much of her life to improving education for people with Down syndrome. And we're so thankful for Roberta's life, and because she inspired you in ways that we will never fully know. So we're sending our love to you for the loss of Roberta. And coming from my point of view as a medic, I can say the evidence base that we have around many aspects, the effect people with Down syndrome, their health, being able to live a full and healthy life. We have, tombs of evidence now that people with Down syndrome deserve a tailored approach. And so we're 100% with you there. Thank you so much, Sue. I will let you jump off the stage, and I am going to now, in a moment, welcome Fionn up to tell us a little bit about his advisory group that he's begun. And after that, we're going to hear from Heidi and James a bit about what's going on in the future, how you can help, and maybe some dates for your diary to make sure you're free. So Fionn, can I have you up on the stage? Welcome. Thank you for being here. Fionn has just gotten back from a very exotic trip. You're joined with your dad, Jonathan. Hi, Jonathan. You're another member of the group. We're so pleased you're both with us tonight. How was your trip? Tell us where you went.
We went to Dubai.
Was it nice and hot?
Well, it was nice and warm there.
Yeah, not as hot as we thought it would be.
Oh,
but
really?
It was wonderful to attend the World Expo.
Yes,
and to see so many countries coming together. There was competition, but they were all competing to show off what wonderful countries they are. So
yes.
so it was really
I hope you played your fiddle for them.
Yes, I did.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to get off the stage. Tell everyone what you have been up to, Fionn.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Fionn Crombie Angus. I am a founding officer of the National Down Syndrome Policy Group and a researcher. I have been a member of an inclusive research group for 8 years. We do research through surveys, focus groups, and on-camera interviews. And I recently became co-chair of inclusive research for the oldest and most well-respected global research association for intellectual disability, and the first board member with living experience in its 60-year history. The NDSPG has 5 founding officers with Down syndrome, roughly 1/3 of the entire group. We come from diverse backgrounds, but representing the needs and interests of everyone with Down syndrome is too big a task for just us. I offered to set up a focus group to research how the Down Syndrome Act could help the most. We can also inform our peers about how we are changing the narrative by changing laws and policies, and perhaps inspire them to become advocates themselves. So we decided not just to run a focus group, but we established an advocacy group. The five of us facilitate it together. We've had our first meeting already. We spent a lot of effort to get things right. We consulted with experts. We made sure that all the information we shared was rigorously ethical and easy to understand. And we had fun. Now that we've begun, we'll see where things go. I'm looking forward to sharing the findings from our research with the people in government who are going to help us make a better tomorrow.
Thank you, Fionn. I'm so honored that I'm actually I'm the technical assistant on your meetings. And you're right, you guys did have fun. There may even be love connections made over the few weeks, but we'll say no more. That wasn't the main objective of the meetings. Thank you, Fionn, for stepping up and starting the advisory group.
Yes, but well, thank you.
And how many meetings have we got booked so far with everybody?
How many meetings do we have?
First
3, right?
Yeah.
One
3,
one per month, but with them,
Yeah.
then you're going to talk to the group and see what comes next.
Yeah.
I think I have a feeling that we may be doing more than 3 meetings, don't you?
I think so. Yes.
And hopefully one day we can all join together maybe as well.
That's a
Yeah.
wonderful idea.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Can people still get involved with this advisory group, or is it too late for them?
There's still space, I think.
Yeah.
right?
I think so.
That's what you said, is that we're still open, and
Yeah.
so it's to your email address that people should be sending interest.
That's right.
I don't know how we could share it in the chat.
Yeah.
We will share it in the chat, and if you don't get it in the chat, come along to our website, and there is an advisory group link at the top where it gives you, there's a lovely video from you, Fionn, telling people about the group, and it's got an easy read invitation for everybody. And we're when we were chatting about this, we know that not everyone can join a Zoom meeting. So maybe there's people out there that even it's too much for them to do this type of interaction. We're going to be working hard, aren't we, to see how else we can bring in other people's points of view for other members of the community that have communication difficulties. So if you're out there and your loved one is coming to your mind and you want them to take part, let us know what are their needs, what are their levels of communication, and I'll sit down with Fionn and Jonathan. We can see how we can make sure your voice is heard as well and your loved one's voice is heard. So thank you, Fionn.
Yeah, thank you, Lee.
All right, well, without further ado, we're going to ask Heidi and James, our favorite married couple. No, just kidding. I'm sure there's other married couples out there. We shouldn't pick favorites, should we? And I'm going to ask you to unmute. Hopefully you get a little invitation to unmute. There we go. So guys, have you got a little something to tell us about what's going on?
I want to say hello, and how are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Hello everyone. My name's James. And I'm Heidi, and I'm married to him. So as you all know, the 21st of March is World Down Syndrome Day. Where we celebrate me and James and Fiona.
Heidi, just speak a little louder. Your microphone's a bit quiet.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
As you all know, the 21st of March is World Down Syndrome Day. This year, Down Syndrome Day, we hope that the Down Syndrome Bill will be talked about inside Parliament. And everything goes to plan, the bill will become the Down Syndrome Act that day. It will be a special day as we will be celebrating who we are every year. And celebrating towards improving life chances for people living with Down syndrome. I even imagined when we set up the policy group that the first Down syndrome bill in the world was going to happen, and that we would be having it. And now I introduce you my fantastic husband.
We thank Liam Fox for recognising the need for positive change. So excited to be part of it all. It's the start. We need to change the world with Down syndrome, as many of them still don't get included or support in society in 2022. And we hope in the coming months that you will all help guide the government understand the challenges we face and how we can overcome them. We realize that people might want to hold local events on World Down Syndrome Day, but we, as many people as possible, will join us at Parliament in the afternoon on the 21st of March. Raise national awareness and celebrate celebrate us. Please put the event in your diary and let's make the gathering the biggest party yet for our community. We look forward to seeing you there. Let's do this.
Stay happy, and it was okay with you. Drinks on us.
You might be buying a lot of drinks if you say that, guys. Start saving. Well, thank you for letting us know that we need to save the 21st of March for hopefully a big celebration. And yeah, put that in your diaries, and more information will be forthcoming. Thank you so much for chatting with us tonight. I'm going to invite another team member up. Lou, let's bring you up. Lou, tell us a little bit more about what we can do as a community to support what's going on around the policy group.
Yes, hello everyone. We would love you all to get involved. There are many ways that you can do this, and as Heidi and James have just said, please think about joining us on the 21st of March outside of Parliament, when hopefully the bill will become an act. It's going to be a great celebration and making history, but as they've said, the 21st of March obviously is quite an important date for most of us, and a big day for support groups and raising awareness. But please think about joining us, because we're hoping for quite a party atmosphere. Sounds like Heidi's going to be buying the drinks, so we know that Fionn hopefully will, and some of his friends should be providing some brilliant music. And as Fionn has already mentioned, we have the National Down Syndrome Policy Group advisory group. So please, just to reiterate what everyone said so far, get in touch with Fionn if you know someone would like to get involved. It is a really good group, and we have had fantastic feedback from the first meeting and had a lot of fun, like Fionn said. We'd really like to hear from local groups, so please sign up and sign up to get regular updates and our newsletter, and you can find how to let us know your email address by looking at our website. We'd also like to start a network of supporters, so any fundraising ideas that you might have would be gratefully received. Again, please email us at contact@NDSPG UK. And just talking about emails, if you have any inquiries for us, please use that email address, and we will hopefully endeavour to get back to you within 48 hours. And all the information that you need to know is on our website. Made it short and sweet.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lou. So yeah, make a note of that. And we are working hard to get newsletters out to everybody, and also to make easy read newsletters. And if you know of an adult with Down syndrome who would want to receive that, let us know. We'd love to have an ability to email them so that they can get direct access to the easy read version straight away. So thank you so much, Lou, for telling us what people can do to get involved, and letting us know that there is still an opportunity to get in touch with the Fionn for the advisory group. So thank you so much, everybody, for staying on that little bit extra time tonight. We really appreciate it. And as I said, we were saving all the questions that we didn't get to and making sure they roll over into the next webinar. We're going to aim to hold these on a monthly basis. And if we don't update you in the webinar, we're going to be working on updating you via our social media channels and our website, frequently asked questions. So thank you so much for coming along and giving your evening tonight, and have a wonderful week. And we've got lots to celebrate this evening. So go and open the bubbly.
Jackknife has old McKeith, baby, keeps it out of sight. You know that shark bites with its teeth, baby. Scarlet billows start to spread. Fancy gloves don't wear old McKeith, baby. So there's never a trace of red. Oh, Sunday morning lies a body